Hey there. In this video, I am going to talk about how to create a cam system that will be used to control the recoils of these barrels. And then later on, we'll use that cam system to control a lot of other mechanical aspects that kind of need to be coordinated with the firing of the guns. So let's start off going in the top view, and I'm going to center my cursor. I'm going to create a circle. And let's move it up so I can see what we're doing. And I want to move this circle so that it is just behind these collars here. That's good. Go into edit mode, and I want to delete that edge, X, edges, vertex mode, and I'm going to select everything from there all the way down to the 6 o'clock position. And then making sure that I'm in active element, I'm going to scale this back till it's maybe like a third of the way back. EY to extrude that edge down, SY to scale it back up so that we have a nice 90-degree angle here. And that is the shape of our cam. So hit everything EZ, go up a little bit, give it some thickness, and did I drag that straight up? I think so. To fillet, to fillet, and go in the top view. We're just going to drag this way back here just to get it out of the way, and maybe down. We're not going to render this ever, so it's not important really where it is, but we do want it out of the way. Let's move our cursor here. I'm going to select everything, Shift D, go down, and then looking at top bottom, I'm going to rotate this bottom cam to be 180 degrees, so R180. All right. And you can see that we've kind of got this kind of a spiral in. So the gun's going to snap back into this hole and then eventually ride forward back to its neutral position as the cam spins. All right, so let's call this cam. And in top view, I'm going to create a bone that will act as the follower. So single bone, GY, and just move this up here. And I found that sometimes it's good to select the entire cam and just rotate it a little bit, because Blender seems to have a little bit of a problem deciding which side of the line this follower is on, and you get some jittering. So just to kind of tell Blender, yeah, I'm on this side of the line, just rotate the whole thing just a little bit, and that seems to fix that problem. So from side view, I'm going to move my bone up so that it's roughly in the middle there. And I want to add a constraint that will make this bone stick against the cam as the cam rotates. So if we go into pose mode and I select the bone, come down here to bone constraints, and we want to add a shrink wrap to it. And we want the bone to shrink to the cam. So we're going to select the cam. We want it to project because we want it to run right along this axis, and this is the y-axis of the cam. It's the negative y-axis, in fact, and you can see how the cam snapped against the see how the following bone snapped against the cam. So now if we rotate the cam on the z-axis, you can see how the cam rides on it and then snaps into that hole, and that's going to be the motion we're going to take. All right, so let's check our rename our bone. We'll call this follower.r, because this bone is going to control the recoil of the right gun. All right, so the next thing to do is we want to animate this cam so that it spins. And it's going to spin during the entire animation. We don't turn this on or off. It just runs all the time, kind of like a clock in the background. And it, as a clock, it kind of times everything else. So this gun fires 120 rounds a minute, or 2 bullets a second, which means I need to have this cam rotate 360 degrees every 12 frames. So if I'm here on frame 1, I can add a keyframe on the z-axis because I want to rotate on the z-axis. And then I want to go to frame 12, and I want to rotate RZ180. You can see that I've rotated 180, but I really wanted to say 360 because I want to go all the way around. So 360 degrees by frame 12, so in half a second. And I'm going to, I hate when that happens, insert a single keyframe there. And if we run our animation, it spins once. That's all it does, because that's all we told it to do. And then up here in this window, I'm in the graph editor here. So just graph editor, and you want to pick the the keyframe thing, the keyframe that we've keyed here, which is the Z rotation. So I select the Z rotation, and if I right click, I want to choose extrapolation mode, and I want to do linear. And that's going to tell Blender just to run that cam full speed forever. You can see we've got that nice kind of snapping back motion, and then it kind of glides forward along that curve. All right. So far, so good. So how do we translate the motion of this cam into motion back here? Before we do that, I want to take this whole thing, this cam and this bone, and I want to parent it to the breech. All right, so we're just going to parent it to that, so that if we move the breech, it all sticks together. All right, let's go into, well, let me pick, I'm going to edit mode, and I'm going to double click on this edge loop right at the back of this collar. I'm going to put my cursor right there because I want to add an empty right on the seam between the bone, or between the spring and the barrel. And I want to shrink that down. So go over here to the data properties and just shrink that down. Don't use S to scroll to shrink it or scale it. You want to do it over here, and I'm just making it a little more manageable so it doesn't quite stick out as much. And I'm going to duplicate this guy, and I'm going to move it to the other side just by putting a negative on it. So now I have my two empties there. Now if I take this empty and I shift click on the bone and control P, and I want to choose bone. And now if I hide these for a second and I run the animation, you can see my bone snaps there. Now what I messed up on, so it's a good learning experience, is that I did not have my simulation set to frame 1 when I positioned that, when I parented that bone. So I'm going to Alt P, and I'm going to clear the parent, and it's going to put it back where it's supposed to be, and then I'm going to Shift P, Shift Select, and then Control P, and choose bone again, and that should make sure that it, there we go. Make sure that it snaps back and forth in the right spot, because we want it to, in the resting position, to be on the seam between those two. All right, so let's do the easy part first. I'm going to take the barrel, shift select the empty, control P, and object. And now if I play the animation, the barrel snaps back. That's cool. And if I hit RXX, I don't want to do that. I want to do it this way. Just move this around. You can see that everything still moves okay because I don't want to lose stuff. All right, so how do we figure out how to get this spring to snap back? It's not too bad. I'm going to hide this. I'm going to select this and go to top view, and let's see. I'm going to create a bone here. So armature, single bone, GY, and I'm going to shift select the spring, and then I'm going to isolate them just so I can see a little better what I'm doing. And I'm going to go to stick just to make it a little easier to see. And I want to scale this bone down so that it's as close to the length of the spring as I can make it. So GY, and just, oops, I don't want to do that. I want to do median. Yes. And just try to get the endpoints so that they're just on the edge of the spring, like that. That looks good. And we can go back to the bigger view there. All right. So this bone is going to control the contraction of the spring. And what I want to do is I want to take this bone, I'm going to go into edit mode, or pose mode, sorry, and go down to constraints. And this time I want to add a stretch to constraint. And we're going to choose this empty as the target for that. And if I select the empty now and move it around, you can see how that bone stretches. All right, that's what that constraint does. And if I take my spring and I shift select the bone, I hit Control P, and I choose bone. Now when I move the empty, the entire spring moves. Now what we need to do though is we need to parent that bone, that spring bone, to the breech so we don't lose that motion. So now when I move my empty, my targeting empty all that stuff moves nicely together. So now let's unhide our barrel, and let me hit play, and let's see what happens. So pretty cool. Bang, 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 bang. All right, and basically going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to take this bone here, side view, and I'm going to Shift D, bring it straight down. All right, and this one I'm going to rename this. I'm just going to call this follower L for left, and this bone will control the motion of the other gun. But because these cams are inverted from each other, that means that the guns are going to fire alternately. So we need to basically do the same thing. We're going to choose our empty, choose the bottom bone, Control P, bone, choose the barrel, choose the empty, Control P, select that. Hide this, hide this, hide this, hide this. Go to top view. I'm just going to duplicate this bone because it's already a nice size. I'm going to disable the stretch to just for a moment, and I'm going to move it across the axis. And then for its stretch to target, I want on this side, right? Because we want it to follow the left barrel. So, because I had it disabled. All right, turn it back on. That works. All right. Like this, and I want to parent the spring to this bone. Control P, bone. If I move this, that works. That's good. Double check, make sure our targeting works. Everything tracks nicely. That looks good. And with some luck, if I play, you can see that the barrels alternately fire back and forth. Boom, 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 boom. All right, the next step is to create a switch that'll let us turn the firing mechanisms on and off. So I'm going to create a bone, armature, bone. I'll just move this straight up. And let's call it fire on, off. And go down to here, call it fire on, off. And put it on so we can see the names. All right, now we know what it's doing. And you can see here that the local z-axis of this bone points off to the side. And if we're in pose mode and I rotate this along the z-axis, that's going to control whether the guns are firing. It's kind of a bit like a switch. So think of it as a switch. So let's change this to XYZ. And if this rotates along the local z-axis, that's going to be our controller. And what we're going to do is we're going to create drivers on these bones that turn the or deactivate the shrink wrap. So if you look at the bone here, and if I click on this icon here, you can see how that it disables the shrink wrap, kind of acting like a clutch, right? We're disengaging the clutch, and the bone no longer touches the cam. And then when we run the animation, that bone doesn't move anymore because it's been disabled. But then when we put it back on, it starts to run again. So we're going to automate that. Instead of having to click on this, we're going to create a driver on each of these bones that does that. So I'm going to, with this bone selected, I'm going to right click on this eyeball. I hate when it does that. I'm going to right click on the eyeball and add driver. There we go. And if we go, I'm going to drag this down here, go into drivers, and we want to click on the shrink wrap enabled bone here. So see this thing here, it says enable shrink. That's this. So it's referring to the shrink wrap and the enable disable function. All right, so that's the data we're working on. And this is the driver editor here. And this is going to allow us to use information from this bone to change properties on these bones. So what do we want to do? We want to choose this switch as the driving force, and there's only one bone in there, and we want to base it on the Z rotation, and we want to use local space. So when this bone rotates along the Z axis while we're in pose mode, that data is going to be transferred into this variable. And you can see right now the value is zeros, so this is radians and this is degrees, and I'm going to call this fire gun. So that's the name of my variable, is fire gun. And then up here, I can create a little expression that returns a number or a Boolean or something that then is used to do something else somewhere in the program. So I'm going to write true if trunk, degrees, fire gun, greater than or equal to 90, else false. And spelling counts. And everything is case sensitive too, so if you get a compiler error, it could be one of those. See what I didn't do here. I need a parenthesis after the 90. Better. Okay. So what this is saying is return true if this bone is at an angle of greater than or equal to 90 degrees. Otherwise, return false. And this true or false is a switch for this purple thing over here. So if it's true or false, it's going to be either enabled or disabled. Right now, the bone is at 0 degrees. So this is not true, so it's returning false. So it is disabling that. Now if we go into our bone and we go into pose mode, and I rotate it along the z-axis 90 degrees. We go back into object mode and we check this bone again. You can see that this eye is now enabled because the fire gun is now at 90 degrees. And like I said down here, this is radians, and by default Blender works in radians. So I wanted to convert it to degrees just to make it, I think, a little easier to read. All right, so that is that bone. And the nice thing is we don't have to redo all this typing for this other bone. I can simply right-click, copy driver, select this bone, right-click, paste driver. And now this bone also has the same code in it. So now let's see what happens when we play the video. So the switch is down, right, and both guns are firing because both cams are enabled. Now if I go into pose mode, and I'm just going to hit Alt-R to reset this bone to its original position, goes up, you can see these bones are disconnected and the gun stops firing. Alright, so that's pretty cool. The other cool thing is now we can turn the gun on and off in animation very easily just through this bone. So we have 120 frames, so let's go into pose mode. And I'm just going to hit I to set the rotation there, and I don't know, maybe go to 50, and I'm going to hit I again, go to 51, and I'm going to hit 90, rotate it down, hit I, and let's let it fire for a bit, hit I, go one more, and changes back to 0, and hit I. So you can see we've got our keyframe set. Now if we run the animation, the gun will turn on and off and start firing. So you see as that bone switches down, the guns start firing. And hopefully, if we move our gun around, boom, 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 boom. So everything seems to be working. It's tracking. The gun's automatically recoiling for us. All right, things are looking pretty good. I think that is probably it for this lesson. In the next chapter, I'm going to add emitters to this so we can fire tracer rounds out of here. And we're going to link that firing with this switch. So we're going to be able to basically, turn on and off the particle emitter based on this switch, which means we can animate that as well just from this bone. All right, so if that sounds interesting to you, I will see you in the next chapter.